Good luck to everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Welcome to our new podcast, How You Should Vote, where we shit all over our ballots.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read.
The podcast where we should all over our books.
Yes, we say this is what you should read. This is what we should be reading. We're just shitting all over our books.
Yep. Yep, constantly.
Yeah. How's everyone doing today?
Not bad today. I'm in a much better mood than I have been as of late. So
Aw.
one of those days, even though it's a Sunday and I had to work, I just smashed through my to-do list and was out by noon, and it was great.
Yeah, you were texting at like 7:30. You were like, I got this done and this done. And I was like, I just woke up.
Yeah.
So. Great.
Exactly.
I had gotten out of bed and not much else.
Yeah. I know. My plan this weekend was like, okay, on Saturday I'm going to relax and just read and do whatever. And then Sunday will be my day to get things done. Only one of those has come true. Guess which one? But that's okay. That's what weekends are for.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're super busy all the time. You deserve a weekend to take care of yourself. That's what I say.
Thanks. And
you were productive. You made muffins.
I did. I made blueberry muffins. Okay, yes. Now we're on to the Julia Cooks segment of the podcast. I made blueberry muffins this morning. They were delicious. So they're from this cookbook. I'll bring it back to a book. It's called Simply Perfect Every Time. And it is the best little cookbook. I use it all the time. And it just has classic recipes of your favorite things. Like they have a good bolognese recipe. They have several muffin recipes, like shrimp scampi, just like, I don't know, just like classic recipes. And it's in alphabetical order, and it's this teeny book, but I've used it so much, and it's my favorite cookbook. So that's Simply Perfect Every Time. Check it out. It's pretty old. I've had it for like over a decade. So yeah. Anyway, speaking of books, Rachel, what are you reading?
So my book club is meeting on Tuesday that I am a part of through my library. And we're going to have an outdoor meeting, which will be the last outdoor meeting we'll be able to have because I live in Maine and it gets cold. So we're reading The Penny Poet of Portsmouth by Catherine Towler.
Ooh.
So it's a memoir. It's described as a memoir of place, solitude, and friendship. And it's about her friendship with Robert Dunn, who was a poet who lived kind of off the grid in downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and just kind of follows like the changes to all these little seaside cities in New England, and how over the last few decades, have really become, have changed from what they were, and have really become very gentrified and very like, it used to be, little seaport towns, and the people who worked in like, at the harbor or at the shipyard could live there, but now it's like really expensive, and I think it's going to be a really interesting. I have not that far into it, even though I have to read it by Tuesday, but I think it's a really fast read, so excited.
Oh.
I like to read about places that I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book that just came out about our town, Rachel, about, I can't remember the title.
I think it's just called The Mill.
The Mill?
It might be. But it's about, so it's about the town next to the town we grew up in, but it was kind of the central town of where we're from, and how back in the 70s, before kind of the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts were really underway, this paper mill in that town was dumping a lot of bad, byproducts of pulp and paper business into the river. And there was a lot of air and water pollution that some people claimed caused higher rates of cancer, especially colon cancer in that region. They call it Cancer Valley. It's somewhat been debunked, but kind of hard to say. But there's a book about it coming out.
That's called Milltown by Carrie Arsenault.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to read it.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a lot about like what's remains of this town. You know, it's dealing with economic depression.
It's definitely a ghost town now, for sure. Compared especially to what it was.
The mill's back open, but yeah, definitely a lot different. Yeah. Kelly, what are you reading?
I have finally started Don't Judge Me by Lisa Schroeder, which I've mentioned multiple times. I've finally started it. I'm literally one chapter in, so nothing's happened yet, but the main character is named Hazel, and she's an only child. And she's talking about how at dinner, her parents just kind of laser focus on her. And she's like, it might be nice to have siblings so that like somebody else could take the heat for a bit. And I'm also an only child, and I identified so strongly.
Aww. Cool.
But it's so good so far, and all of her books are amazing. So it's really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just started Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jassy. This is our book club book, the book club that Kelly and I have here in Baltimore. And I am also only like 1.5 chapters in. So, but I mean, so far great. So I expected to love this book, and I know I'm going to, and the first 2 chapters are great. So, and this is the book about a Ghanaian American family. The parents are immigrants, and the daughter is a PhD candidate at Stanford studying addiction and depression, which are things that people in her family deal with. She also grew up evangelical, so she's kind of reckoning her scientist side and her religious side. So I'm excited to dive a little deeper into it. But I finished Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors this weekend also, and that was so sweet. I love Sonali Dev's books. I can't wait for her others to come out. I know she has an Emma retelling plan and a Sense and Sensibility retelling plan, and I'm already like predicting who in the family that these books are centered on will be featured in those. I'm like really excited to see what happens next. But yeah, good books. Okay.
I brought Transcendent Kingdom with me. I'm at my mom's house, and I'm here for another week. And our book club is in 2 weeks. So if Transcendent Kingdom is not my currently reading next weekend, I'm going to need you guys to yell at me to get in gear.
Okay.
Well,
but I'm so excited.
It's pretty short. It's only like 260 pages, Kelly. And the margins, look at the margins. They're so big.
Oh, nice.
So I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a quick read, which I wasn't expecting given the kind of book it is. It's kind of a heavy topic. So I think it's, and her writing is so engrossing that I think I'm going to fly through it once I really get started.
Yes. And also, sorry for anybody watching this. So I guess, sorry, Lisa, as I just like dive into the camera to see the book.
Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, that's why you should listen, not watch.
I also just realized I have my shirt's on inside out. Sorry, Lisa.
You look great either way.
It's a black t-shirt, so who's going to know?
Well, Lisa, now, and everybody listening.
Because I admitted it. Oh, we're doing great. We're doing so great today.
I mean, whatever. It's 2020 at this point. Like,
yeah.
At least we're wearing something.
Yes.
You know, like we're not in like stained t-shirts and I don't know. But there's a lot of 2020 left, so fingers crossed, everybody.
Yeah.
On a kind of related note, we're going to continue what we started last week of all of us talking about one thing of book news. And if you've been paying attention, I'm sure you've heard about this, but it has come out that Bob Woodward and President Trump talked about coronavirus, 18 times between February and June. And while the president was telling the country that this is not a big deal, it's blown way out of proportion, kids can't get infected, you don't need to wear masks, just things left and right that were not true. He was privately admitting to Bob Woodward that he knew it was a very big deal, that it could be transmitted through the air, that kids could get infected. Just basically almost everything he was saying was completely false. Mm-hmm. And his rationale for it, both to Woodward and to everybody now that it's come out, is that he doesn't want to cause a panic. Now, none of us have read this book. It does come out today, called
Rage.
Rage, yes.
Which is exactly what I feel.
Yes. I almost said Fear, but that was his first book.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a two-part addressing that needs to be done, which is, do we think that it was right to not cause a panic? And also, do you think that maybe Bob Woodward should have told us this earlier?
Should we take the first question first?
I think either or. I feel like, for me personally, I see the value in not wanting to cause a panic, but I think there's a difference between, hey, this is really bad, but we have brilliant scientists, we're going to get through it. We will tell you everything you need to know as soon as you need to know it, but things will change, as we've never really had this situation before. So just stay as safe as you can, and flat out lying to the American people, which is what I think he did.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I remember other politicians saying something similar, but their actions and their policies were designed to contain it, whereas Trump was just saying that, you know, these things don't cause a panic, and then he still didn't do anything about it. Like, I remember, you know, right or wrong, Cuomo and de Blasio were arguing over whether there would be a stay-at-home order in New York. I remember this very distinctly, and everyone was like, oh, they're going to do the stay-at-home order. And I was like, no, I can't remember who was on which side. I can't remember if Cuomo was like, no, there's not going to be a stay-at-home order, and de Blasio was arguing, Cuomo being the governor, de Blasio being mayor of New York City. And like, eventually there was one. There always was going to be one. But the rationale for saying there wouldn't be one was they didn't want to cause panic. They didn't want people going out and rushing the grocery stores in New York and just like causing chaos. But they were always going to do it, right? Because it needed to be done. So I could see wanting to manage people's emotions and also manage just like the volume of people going to the store at one time, like, which would cause more spread. But then to try to temper the chaos and then also not do anything is just, you're just trying to, like, Trump is just trying to make himself look better. You know, like, he's just trying to wish it away. Mm-hmm. You know, he knows it's bad, but he's not telling the people that it's bad. And also, he didn't do anything. He didn't institute a national stay-at-home order. He didn't institute a national mask mandate. He didn't do any of that when he should have. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference to me, right? Like, if you're going to lie to us, at least do something on the back end to, like, try to keep us safe. Right, because he lies all the time. We knew he was lying when he said this. Like, this doesn't really reveal anything to me. Like, we always knew he was lying, but yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and as far as should Woodward have revealed, you know, what the president said to him, you know, prior to now, I mean, maybe. I mean, as far as, like, I know he was, like, getting information from other sources, etc., and he wanted to put out, like, a fully researched, you know, piece of journalism, while at the same time, it's like, you had the president on tape.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's obviously not Bob Woodward's fault.
Yeah. I don't think I'm that bothered by it. Like, like I said, I think we all knew he was lying. And I don't think that Woodward releasing the tapes earlier would have changed anyone's minds. Like the people who follow Trump blindly were going to continue to follow him blindly. He would have accused Woodward of doctoring the footage. Like this guy, this idiot, sorry, but he's just like, he always does that. So I don't think that I think it's actually more powerful now because now he has so much evidence. He has spoken to him over so many months. Now the book's coming out. Like, yeah, it's maddening that he heard this and we didn't. But if he had released it then, I think Trump would have been able to like slip away from it a little bit easier. And now he can't. Yeah. So I'm almost like, well, and yeah, Bob Woodward didn't owe the American people the truth. Trump owed us the truth.
Right. And
well, oh, sorry, Rachel.
No, I was going to say, did you guys see the tweet that Donald Trump put out directly related to this?
No.
It says, Bob Woodward had my quotes for many months. If he thought they were so bad or dangerous, why didn't he immediately report them in an effort to save lives? Didn't he have an obligation to do so? No, because he knew they were good and proper answers. Calm, no panic. So he basically just roasted himself. Like,
I mean, he's also been comparing himself to Winston Churchill. And I guess that's fair because apparently Churchill was also a little bit racist. So that's a good correlation. But I don't think Winston Churchill basically told people there's no war. It's totally fine.
Right.
Do whatever you want. It's great.
No.
But
Churchill would have taken this as an opportunity to like show what a strong leader he is, right? He would have been like, you have to do this, this, and this for the good of the country, right? This was I'm sorry, it's a horrible pandemic, it's a horrible disease, but Trump didn't cause it, right? This would have been like we're turning into a political podcast, I'm sorry, but like this would have been easy for him to like, say, oh, I'm gonna be the one to like contain it, but he can't even do that. So to bring it back to books though, I am interested to read the whole book because I'm curious what else Trump said, and I can't believe Woodward got this much access to him.
I guess Trump's advisors would try to like end some of the interviews early, and he'd be like, no, keep going. This guy keeps like, man, he's loving my answers. He just keep like bringing it back to me. He loved Bob Woodward challenging him because he felt like it gave him an opportunity to look better, even though I'm sure he just looked more like a fool.
Wow.
But to him, in his head, of course, he's like, wow, I'm doing such a great job with these interviews. I'm really showing up Bob Woodward.
Yeah. Wow.
If you are a politician and you're talking to Bob Woodward, you kind of deserve what you get, I think, because, he's pretty famous. Yeah. So we'll see.
Kelly, what do you think? Do you think that Woodward should have released the information earlier?
I really don't, just because, like you said, he didn't have an obligation to us. But also, if he had released it early, I feel like it wouldn't really have had the impact that it does now, because, and think of all the stuff that's happened this year.
Yeah.
Like Australia on fire this year.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant dying this year. So probably by November, we may have forgotten this already by November. Yeah. But also, like you said, the people that know he's a liar, we knew it back then too. And the people that don't, they're not going to believe it. They wouldn't have believed it in March. They won't believe it now.
Yeah.
And roughly about a third of the country think he's doing a good job. And probably they're the same people that are showing up at his rallies without masks. So
yeah.
Good luck to everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Welcome to our new podcast, How You Should Vote, where we shit all over our ballots. Thank you.
Oh, man. Okay, so now we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do our What You Should Read segment, all about books that you should read by Latinx authors in honor of Latinx Heritage Month or Hispanic Heritage Month, and we'll be joined by Emily Duran, so stick around. Hi, welcome back. We are joined by Emily Duran. Hi, Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys, for having me today.
Yes. We're excited to talk to you today about books that we recommend written by Latinx authors. And I'm just curious, what kind of books you typically like to read? What are some of your favorite genres?
I do this thing that I typically do with the rest of my life, which I'm reading like maybe 5 books at a time. So it takes me around 6 months to finish all of them because I go back and forth. I read a little bit of everything. Typically, it's more fiction rather than nonfiction. I am reading like Water for Chocolate in honor of Hispanic Week this week. And I tend to gravitate more towards magical realism and those type of books.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I have a friend who does the same thing. She'll have like 5 or 6 books going, and she'll read one chapter and then read a chapter from the next one, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, I don't think I could do that. I usually have a couple books going at a time, but I like the variety though. That must be nice.
Sometimes it gets hard because you get confused characters and plots, but it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Well, we're just going to dive right in because we have a lot of great books to talk about. So, Emily, as the guest of honor, will you please start us off and tell us what is the first book that you recommend?
I think my all-time favorite book is House of Spirits by Isabel Allende. Yes. It's her first debut novel, and at first it didn't want to be published, but she finally found a house that was able to publish it. I think it just embodies everything in like Hispanic culture and magical realism specifically. It's one of the first books that I recommended to my husband, and it was his first book by a Hispanic author. And it's probably my first adult book that I read. I probably read it when I was in my 12 or something. And before that, I was just reading Harry Potter and Twilight and that sort of book. So it was definitely a more mature book for me. And I just love the story about, the kind of the patriarch of the family. And then we have this other character named Clara, who is a clairvoyant, and she kind of is connected to kind of the spiritual world and all the family dynamics and how it was back then. And it's very male-centered, but then I feel like the female characters also have a good voice on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And the Clara character is clairvoyant, right? Like you said.
Yes.
And I feel like Isabel Allende has also said that she has some like mystical ties. Like she brings that into a lot of her works too. Like I haven't read that book, but I've read Paula, her memoir, which is also very good. And she talks a lot about that, like her connection to the spiritual realm. So that's a great pick. Love her. Cool. Rachel, what's your pick?
So my first pick is Bless Me Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya. Is it Anaya, I think? So Bless Me Ultima, I read this in high school. It was assigned to me, and it's about this little boy named Tony, Antonio Marez, and his family takes in this older woman named Ultima. She's not a relative, I don't think, but his parents say, like, in our culture, we take care of our elders, and she has nobody else, and she needs a place to sort of live out her days. And she is a curandera, so she's like a spiritual healer, uses herbs and things like that to heal people. And as Tony is growing up, he is trying to sort of reconcile his heritage with the whole sort of more paganist arts from Ultima with his upbringing in the Catholic Church. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of symbolism in this book, but it's still very approachable. It's not like over your head kind of symbolism. I think it's very beautifully written. It's just like, it's just such an engrossing story. And I love Tony. I love Ultima. You just want to like keep them in your heart forever. And yeah, that's Bless Me Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya.
Oh, that sounds so good. Kelly, what's your first pick?
Okay. I have Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. This is so good and so cute. I thought that it was going to be about one thing, but apparently it is the perfect book for people who like Gilmore Girls, because it's basically all about I know, Rachel, I know. But it's like this girl, and her family has been cursed in that if one of the women down the line falls in love with a boy on a boat, she will get pregnant, and before the baby is born, the man will die. And it happened to her mom, and it happened to her grandma.
Wow.
And I thought it was going to be more about that, but there's all this stuff going on. The grandmother is from Cuba and left when she was pregnant. And so Rosa is super into that part of her heritage, and she's trying to learn more about it. But her grandmother has this attitude where it's like, this is super painful, I'm not going to talk about it, which makes sense. But she also is an actual healer, so there's a lot of magic going on, and it's so cool and so good. And I love that, you know, the place where you're from is as much a part of your heritage as the people that you're related to. And it was so great. And I loved everything about it. And also they live in a small town, and there are a lot of town meetings. So that really made me think of Gilmore Girls too. It's just a couple years old. I think everything else I picked is from this year. Well, two of the other books I picked are from this year, and then the other one is older than this. But so good, so fun. I would definitely recommend.
Great.
Yeah. You had me at Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, true. I've heard of that book, and I've seen some mixed reviews, but hearing you describe it makes me definitely want to read it.
I really liked it.
Okay, well, my first pick is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this is a YA novel, and our main character's name is Imani, and she is in high school, and she's a teen mother, and she also loves cooking. She wants to be a chef, and she's really good at cooking as well, and she lives with her abuela. And so she is balancing going to school. She has a part-time job, and she's a mom to 2-year-old baby girl. And it's just a really sweet story about her kind of finding her way in life. She has a really sweet love interest in the book. She starts taking a cooking class from this world-renowned chef, and there's an opportunity for her to go to Spain and study cooking there with the class. And so there are a lot of challenges that she faces, but also there's a lot of joy in the book. And I just loved that the book was about so many different things. It was about culture. It was about food. It was about her being a teen mom, but that wasn't what defined her, which I really liked that too. And yeah, it's just, I love Elizabeth Acevedo, and this is just such a sweet story with one of my favorite main characters of all time. Just like, I want to give Imani a hug. Like, she's just so sweet. And Rachel, I know you love this book as well.
I did. Yeah. I thought this story of just like, you know, her kind of trying to, on the one hand, still be a high school kid, on the other hand, be a good mother, and all at the same time trying to follow her dreams. I mean, I thought it was a very heartwarming story.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's recipes in it too. So she makes food, and the food sounds so good. And there's a little bit of, I don't think there's like magic in it, but it's like, that's the feeling you get when she cooks, is like that her cooking is kind of magic, and it makes everyone who eats it just feels better as soon as they eat her food. So that's With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. Okay, Emily, you're up.
I think this is a book, and I'm currently almost done with it. And it takes me forever, like I said, to finish a book because of my weird method. But it's like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. And it's basically a story about this girl. Her name is Tita. And then it's set in Mexico. And then there's a tradition in her family in which all the women who are the youngest in the family cannot get married and have to take care of the mother as she grows older. So she falls in love with this boy, but unfortunately she can't get married to him. So instead, the mother makes a deal in which that same boy gets married to one of her sisters. So she kind of sees them fall in love and have kids together, and she kind of sees the relationship from afar. What I really like this book is it combines that magical realism that I think is very prevalent in Hispanic and Latin America. So combining a little bit of the realism with a little bit of magic. So the trick or the magic in the book is that she has a very good talent with cooking, and she can kind of transpose her emotions through cooking. So it has a lot of fun recipes as well. For example, when her sister was getting married to the boy she loved, she made the cake. And she was so upset about her getting married that she started crying as she was baking the cake. So some of her tears fell into the cake. So when she serves the cake to all the family during the wedding, that all the guests start crying because she kind of transposed those emotions to the guests. So I think it's really funny. It's a really fun book. So if you like cooking and you like food like me and kind of combining my two favorite things, which is love and cooking, then it's a very good read. And again, it's like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel.
That is such a famous book that I've never read, and I need to read it. And that's a really good description. So I'll have to check that out.
It's so good. And the recipes, you want to go to a Mexican restaurant right away.
Yes. Okay, Rachel, you're up.
So my next pick is another kind of older book, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And this book is not for everyone. I'm just going to start with that because it is people either love it or they hate it, I think. And the reason being is, so it's this epic tale following this huge family. It's huge because this one character has like 17 children from 17 different women, and they all have the same name. They're all named Aureliano. And so when you're reading it, everybody has the same name, so it can get very, very confusing about who is who are they talking about. But I loved it. I like weird stuff like that. So I really enjoyed this book. There is a family tree in the beginning, so you can look back and be like, who are they talking about right now? And it just follows the family. Definitely Gabriel Garcia Marquez was like, they call him the father of magical realism. He kind of defined the genre. And this is just definitely one of his definitely most well-known books besides Love in the Time of Cholera, which I haven't actually read that one. I would like to. But it's just, there's so much happens in this book. And there's this one guy who lives just like a ridiculously long amount of time. You're like, how is he this old, kind of a thing. And there's just a lot of interesting things like that in it. So yeah, 100 Years of Solitude. I also read this in high school. But I've been trying to kind of reread it sort of just here and there because they're adapting it for a movie, I think. It might be a show. I'm not sure.
I can't believe it hasn't been adapted yet, actually.
It might have been, but nothing mainstream as far as I know.
I haven't read that one, but I have read Love in the Time of Cholera. I think you would like it, Rachel. For me, I don't think it was for me, but his writing is beautiful. So if you liked his writing style and you like that book, I think you should read his other one.
Yeah, great.
Kelly.
So you guys are talking about all these great, amazing books, and I'm like, well, let me tell you about the young adult and middle grade I've been reading. This one is Lobizona by Romina Garber. I might have probably butchered the title and her name, but it's young adult. It is fantastic. So it's this teenage girl. She lives with her mom. She does not know anything about her father, and they are undocumented. And for most of the book, the only real villain is Ice, which I actively approve of and agree with. But then it turns out that she is from this country where the mythology is that every seventh son is a werewolf, every seventh daughter is a witch. And that's the only way it works. Women are witches, men are werewolves. She's a werewolf.
Oh.
So basically the people that insist this is how it is, they become villains as well, except I still think that Ice is the real villain, and these people are secondary villains. There is a sequel that will come out next year. I cannot wait for it because this book was so fantastic. I usually don't read like paranormal things like that, but it sucked me right in. Ooh. And I just thought it was fantastic. So Lobizona.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I'm going to read that. I also like the idea of like you said, Ice is the villain, yes, but also people who are disapproving of what she is kind of represent like gender binary, like traditional, feeling like we have to conform to traditional gender roles. And I feel like that's also, it's like that kind of thinking is also being the villain. I think that's a cool concept as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, my next pick is a memoir. It's When I Was Puerto Rican by Esmeralda Santiago. And I read this when I was in graduate school. So I was in my like early to mid 20s when I read it, and I think she wrote it. I don't know if she wrote it when she was in her 20s, but it kind of ends when she's around that age, and it starts with her growing up as a child in Puerto Rico, and she's the oldest, and her mother has like I think 7 children, and then by the time they moved to New York, she ends up with 11 children eventually. So she has a lot of siblings. She's the oldest. Her dad is kind of in and out of their lives. And so we see their life in Puerto Rico that is just very chaotic because the dad is kind of coming and going. But there's also a lot of like fun and joy being had. But then her mother decides to take control of like getting away from her abusive relationship and takes the children and moves to New York. And then they start their lives in New York. And then you see a different perspective. And because she's the oldest, she has a lot of responsibilities. Her mom expects a lot from her. She also has like the responsibility to translate for her mom in a lot of places, like when they go to different like places to fill out forms and things like that. She has to help her mom there. And then eventually she ends up at Harvard. And the book ends with her, I think, graduating from Harvard. But it's just like a really great story. And it's so interesting to see, going from Puerto Rico to New York and how their lives change. And I know there's a sequel. I haven't read the sequel to her memoir, but When I Was Puerto Rican, I remember like this one scene in the early part of the book where she's like climbing a tree and just like, as the joy of childhood in that moment, even if like things are chaotic around you. So I just remember really loving that book. So that's When I Was Puerto Rican by Esmeralda Santiago.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Emily, you were nodding when I was talking about it. Have you read that book?
When I Was a Puerto Rican, that's probably one of my favorite books too. It kind of reminds me the character of myself.
Oh.
When I first moved to Maine, and the cultural shock and the weather and kind of all the similar experiences of growing up in rural Puerto Rico, which is where I grew up. So it was kind of made me teary-eyed.
When did you move to Maine?
I moved to Maine 6 years ago. I was 17.
Yep.
Freshman and going to college at the University of Maine, and the weather and everything hit me all at once. Just say that. I remember getting off the plane in Boston, and it was in the middle of the winter because I started in January. And I remember getting off the plane and just feeling the cold blast of the Boston air and thinking, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? This is horrible. I just want to go back. I thought I was going to only make it for a semester, but I guess I like pain.
I cannot even imagine that being your first experience of winter because it gets pretty chilly. But you stayed, so yeah, I guess you've gotten somewhat used to it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Every winter I tell Rachel, like, I think every winter I think I'm not gonna make it. This is it. This is the year I'm dying in May of cold. This is it. This is it. But then I made it through this winter, and now next winter is coming. So
That's hilarious.
it can't be that bad.
Right. Yeah. You've survived.
Yeah. So my next pick is the foretelling of death. I don't know. I'm probably translating the title wrong, but Crónica de una muerte anunciada by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Again, he's one of my favorite authors as well, and it's basically the story. It's kind of like a reconstruction of kind of like a newspaper or journalism about the death of this guy called Santiago, who was killed by these two twin brothers who basically the reason why they killed him is because he had slept with their virgin sister, and that to them was horrible. So the night before the wedding, they find out that the female main character was not a virgin. So the mom and her sisters kind of plot what to do. One of them comes to the idea just on their wedding night, just put some fake blood in the sheets so they will think you're a virgin. And then she eventually confesses, well, I lost my virginity to this guy, called Santiago. And then his brothers kind of avenge his death. And then the story, everyone kind of knows that they're going to kill him, but no one does anything about it. And to me, one of the reasons why I like it is kind of reminds, especially in the climate that we're living in right now, that sometimes we see things that are happening and sometimes we stay quiet, perhaps because we're afraid that what we're saying, might cause some conflict. So that's kind of the moral of the story, that everyone knew what was happening to Santiago, but no one was able to stop his death.
Wow. That sounds so dramatic too.
Yes, it's so good, guys. Read it.
Okay. It's always funny to me, though, that it's almost a trope, right? Like, oh, she's not a virgin. We're just going to pour a little bit of blood on the sheets so her new husband won't get mad. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I will talk to my grandma about this book, and she's like, yes, that, in my generation, that's totally what happened. Like, if you found out that you were not a virgin on your wedding night, your husband will beat you first. And then they will go return you to your house because you were not pure. So to me, this is crazy to think that, that this actually happened back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Crazy. Oh, okay. Rachel, what's your next pick?
So my next pick is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. So this book is about Julia. She is 15 years old, and she's in high school. I think she's a junior. She's very smart. She skipped a grade. And she lives in Chicago with her parents and her sister. But when the book opens, you actually find out that her sister just died. Her sister was older than her, early 20s. And her sister was the perfect daughter. Her name was Olga, and she went to community college and lived at home and would come home, and her mother would embroider or sew, and she was, considered a good girl. And so when she dies, she's like hit by a car while she's texting and walking, and it's just very tragic accident. And, everybody is just so grief-stricken, and Julia is trying to process her grief as she's finding out that there's a lot about her sister that she didn't know. And at the same time, she's coming of age, and she is not the perfect daughter. She is, she's outspoken, and she is rebellious, and she wants to go out and party with her friends, and her mom is like, no, you have to stay home, and why are you doing this to me? And her mom's trying to plan this quinceañera for her, and she's like, I don't want that. So it's a lot of conflict between her and her mom, and just as she's sort of going through these couple of years, just sort of, again, getting to know her mom, getting to know herself, getting to know who her sister was, and solving this mystery of like what was really going on in her life. And there is part of the book where she goes to Mexico to visit family for a little while. That's very interesting. I just thought it was such a great book because it really showed some great character development. The plot was very interesting, and I loved it.
Sounds really good.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Your catchphrase.
Yeah.
It is my catchphrase, but it's also true.
Well, what have you read? What's your next pick?
Okay. Don't Ask Me Where I'm From, by Jennifer DeLeon. This just came out, and I absolutely loved it. So the main character, she and her family, or her dad is undocumented, and he also has a tendency to leave the family for like a little bit of time, and he might be having an affair and off with somebody else. He might be working in another area. It kind of happens. It's not great. She doesn't like it, but it's on a regular basis. But she found out that this time it's not that he's off somewhere else, like on purpose. He was caught and deported back to Guatemala. And so she's trying to deal with that and try to figure out if there's anything they can do to get him back. But it turns out that instead of trying to do it legally, which is definitely a crapshoot, basically they're going to try and send him money so that he can be smuggled back in, which obviously is super, super dangerous and just absolutely terrifying, because like she's researching what he's going to have to do to get back, and it sounds terrifying, obviously. But meanwhile, she's also now at this much nicer school thanks to this program where they're sending poorer kids, typically of color, to this super nice school so that they can quote unquote learn better. And she went from being at a school full of like other people that look like her and sound like her to this super white school that is also, as it turns out, incredibly racist. And they do this really fun program to kind of hopefully clear the air and get people to think like, you know, just because we're not white doesn't mean we're stupid, we're not criminals, whatever. And it sounds like it's going really well. And then this stupid kid that I sincerely hope got punched in the face later starts chanting "Build the Wall" and "White Lives Matter." And I was just like, oh, I fucking hate that kid. Anyway, besides that kid, this is a wonderful book. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, Celeste Ng, who wrote Little Fires Everywhere, blurbed it. So super awesome.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Except for that one kid.
Yeah.
His name was Caleb.
Yeah, you gotta have a villain.
Yeah. Right. The premise a little bit reminds me of that other new book that came out recently, Black Girl Unlimited, where she ends up going to the fancy private school all of a sudden and is kind of moving. But that one is very magical realism too. Emily, since you like that in books, but yeah, it's kind of like living in these two worlds, and yeah.
I have that one too. I have not read it yet.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah. It's really your catchphrase then.
Yeah, it really is. It's actually embarrassing. You should see my Kindle. It is not great.
We're gonna do a whole episode where we trash Kelly's TBR and we tell her which books she should just forget about because she doesn't have time to read all of them. So
I need an intervention and a lot of help.
You should just do my method. Just read them all at once, and then it will take you 3 years.
Oh, okay. It would take a lot longer, and I don't think I can do that. I don't have patience.
Okay, well, I have another YA book to recommend as well. So this one had been sitting on my shelf for about a year, and I finally picked it up yesterday, and I finished it this morning. It was really quick read, so I'm really glad I read it, and it's Undead Girl Gang. by Lily Anderson. So this book is so crazy. The premise is so crazy. So the main character is a Mexican-American girl who's in high school in Northern California, and her best friend, she and her best friend, they're Wiccan. They like to get together and do spells, and they just don't fit in at their very like white conservative high school in Northern California. And then one day her best friend dies, and then these two other popular girls at school die too, and all of their deaths are labeled as suicide. And the main character, Mila Flores, is like, there's no way that Riley killed herself. I'm going to find out who did it. And so she goes on this quest, and she tries to find a spell that will help her figure out who killed her best friend. She ends up bringing back all three girls from the dead. And so from there, they have to figure out, and they're only there for 7 days. So for there, she's like, okay, well, while you're here, we need to figure out who killed you. So it's pitched as Veronica Mars meets The Craft.
Whoa.
So Kelly, you should read this book.
Well, you should know that I have that and I have not read it. I actually bought it based on the comparison to Veronica Mars meets the Craft. And oh God. See, what I like to do is buy books and then not read them. Yeah. And I had actually been joking earlier this year with coworkers that what I need is a Rear Window type situation where I can't leave the house and then I'll read everything. And then it happened, and then I don't read everything. I don't read anything as it happens, but I'm buying like I'm reading everything. Well, so I guess I did this, you guys. I did this.
You did this to yourself, but I would recommend putting this one more at the time. And Halloween would be a good time to read it. But just listen to the author bio. I want to be this woman's best friend. So Lily Anderson is a school librarian and Melville Dewey fangirl with an ever-growing collection of musical theater tattoos and Harry Potter ephemera. She lives in Northern California, far from her mortal enemy, the snow.
Yep.
It's my mortal enemy too.
Yes, mine too.
And I believe the author is Puerto Rican, but it's just such a cute and like creepy book at the same time. I don't know how a book can be both, but there's a lot of body positivity messages in the book as well. It's just great. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. So Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, which what a great title too.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about that book, and it's always been kind of in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh, that sounds good. So
you can borrow it, Rach.
Good.
Okay, so I'm curious, has there been any overlap yet? Do we all have a fourth pick we want to talk about?
I do.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, yay, we did it. No overlap. All right, Emily, you go first.
Oh, I go first.
Yeah.
So I have another book by Isabel Allende because she's my favorite author. And it is a very cute book. It's very nice and breezy. It's very short. City of Beasts. And it's a story about this boy whose name is Alexander Holt. He's 15. And their family is kind of going through a hard time. Like his mom just got diagnosed with cancer. And the family, to deal with everything, they kind of send him off with his grandmother. And his grandmother is very eccentric. She's very, she's a social anthropologist, and she works in New York. So she does a lot of work with National Geographic. And that used to be what I wanted to be when I was younger, was a social anthropologist and kind of travel all over the world. So one of the reasons why I really like that book. So they travel to the Amazons in Brazil. And then while they're there, they kind of go through this adventure. And then he meets locals there, and he goes to really good friends with a girl named Nadia. And then while they're there, I don't want to give it too much away because this is a really good book. They kind of go to the city of the Beast. And then while they're there, they meet the people of the Mist, which are people that are very connected to the spiritual and the other realm and the other world. And then they go through other adventures. And I don't want to give it too much away just in case anyone wants to read it. But it's a really good book. If you kind of like mixing that reality with the other world and the spirits, then it's a good read.
That sounds amazing.
It really does. I really want to read that now.
Yeah. Sounds like a good book.
And the grandmother, she's like so funny. She's very vocal, very outspoken. She says what everyone else is thinking, but she says it out loud, and she's not sorry for being herself.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, Rachel, your next pick.
So my last pick is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Did we overlap?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, I have a backup though, so it's fine.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Well, so this is a collection of short stories. Once again, not for everyone, I think. But definitely for me. I apparently really like weird stuff. I've never, I've always heard when I hear people describe books as weird, I'm always like, oh, I don't know if I would like that. But now having read this, I want to read all the weird fiction that I can find. And I just want to, there's a lot of different stories, but I want to highlight the one that stood out to me the most, that I'm just like, what is this? It was like Law and Order SVU fan fiction or something, where they had these evil like doppelgangers. So like Stabler and Benson, the detectives. Also, there was Abler and Henson. And it's like, it was so weird. That's the only word I can use to describe it, is weird, but very interesting. I really liked it.
Isn't there, there's one story in there too that's like about a virus that spreads.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. And she ends up in, the character in that story ends up in Maine, because the virus isn't spreading quickly enough to get there, and it's kind of more safe. But then like when people come, she's like, get out, But yeah, and it's like a list of all the people she slept with in her life. That's basically the whole story. But yeah, I was like, oh man, that would be like kind of creepy to read again right now.
Right.
Yeah, the stories are creepy, and like they're really like, if you're really squeamish about like really difficult content, you might not want to read it. But I loved it. Her writing is so unique, and yeah, I co-sign that pick for sure.
Yeah, definitely some body horror too. So and just like weird, strange situations, but really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly.
Okay. So my last one is not a YA because it's a middle grade. It's Paula Santiago and the River of Tears by Tyler K. Mejia. Probably butchered that too. But it's part of Rick Riordan's Presents imprint. And I'm mentioning that because what he's doing is he's finding these authors who are taking folktales from different cultures and like putting them in a book and publishing them. And in October, some African folktales are being released. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited for those too. It's Tristan Strong. I don't remember, but it's the second book in a series about Tristan Strong, and both of them are based on like African folklore. So I'm really excited. I did know about this one because it's partially about La Llorona, the woman who had 2 children out of wedlock and then was shamed for it by the culture and the person who got her pregnant both times, which is super awesome. And she ended up not dealing with it well and ended up murdering her children and then feeling awful about it. And then, like wandering the lake where she drowned them and like crying and screaming for her children.
Oh.
Yeah, it's, they have a couple of different horror movies based on that legend. I don't think either of them are very good. Mm-hmm. But, so in this one, Paula Santiago, her mom is always warning her about these different, basically monsters, and Paula loves science, and she's like, this is nonsense. I know these aren't real. Please stop this. And then unfortunately it turns out after one of her best friends goes missing, her mom wasn't wrong, and there's a lot of monsters, and there's like I forget what it's called because they're all in Spanish, but there's like a disembodied hand that tries to kill people, and La Llorona. Yeah, it's great. But beyond that, the really good thing about this is it's really more of an action story than a horror story. So if you have like middle grade aged readers that want something kind of creepy, but that won't keep them up for like months on end, this would be a really good one to start with. But also I like horror movies and my scary meter is broken. So maybe, Julia, you should read it first and say, hey, Kelly was lying. Do not let your children read this book.
I'm better with horror books, I think, now than movies, because I can put the book down and step away. Like the Carmen Maria Machado short stories are creepy as all get out, and I would say border on horror in some ways, but I was able to like read it, and like there were times where I had to be like and like put it down because it was scary. Yeah, I do need to read more horror though. I just haven't read that much. So
I'm getting so many good recommendations for horror. I'm already having an ongoing list for October from you guys.
It's good for October for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say, like, I love that she's this girl who is so into science, and she's trying to figure out what's going on with her friend, and she's like using science to try and track her down. Like she doesn't know what's happening, so she's doing experiments to try and figure out like everything. And even though it's very supernatural, she's brave and she's loyal, and she will not stop until she finds her friend. Like, I mean, I really feel like she could have died in this attempt and her corpse would just keep going. She will not stop. And I love it. I love that she's scared, but she still keeps going.
Yeah.
Like she's gonna save everybody, and she doesn't need anybody to save her. And I just thought it was fantastic. And it does get creepy at the end, but it's not scary throughout.
Yeah.
And smart girls makes me happy. So
well, my last pick was gonna be Her Body and Other Parties, but I do want to also, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but Paula by Isabel Allende. So Paula is her memoir. It's her nonfiction book, and it's written as a letter to her daughter who died from this rare disease. And while she was writing it, her daughter Paula was in a coma for like a year. And Isabel Allende could not write during that time. She was just so, obviously scared and sad about what was happening to her daughter. And so her mother was like, why don't you write a letter about our family and our history to Paula? And so she does. And so the book it goes back and forth between her writing to Paula about their family history, her history, like from when she was a child. And then like, she's just like this amazing story. Like she talks about being a child actor. She suffered abuse. Her family were like in politics, and then they got overthrown, and so they had to like flee to Venezuela. And then eventually she like starts writing and moves to America, but she's telling this story to her daughter, and then it's interspersed with scenes of her at her daughter's bedside. And she has this connection with her daughter when her daughter's in a coma, and there's some mysticism there that Paula and Isabel Allende are able to communicate. So it's so like, I read it and it's just very moving and very sad. So if you want to cry, read this book, but it's beautifully written. Obviously it's Isabel Allende, and it's I don't know if it's her only nonfiction, but it's definitely very, very good. So Paula by Isabel Allende. Cool. Wow, that was so many books. That might be our longest recommendation episode ever, but I have so many new books to read now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Emily, for joining us. This is so much fun.
Yes, I have so many good recommendations too. I was writing them all down, so I have a very good Christmas list of books that I want.
Yeah. Exactly. Just like give them this episode and be like, here, bye. Bye.
Yes.
Great. All right.
So that's our show. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media, WYSR_podcast on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us on Goodreads, What You Should Read Podcast.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bookmarks. Are you the type of person to dog-ear your books? Well, stop it. Pick up a thin piece of cardboard with some writing on it or an old receipt and put it in your book. Bookmarks, the only way to mark your page.